This week on FXM Dailies, come with us as we celebrate the re-release of the Star Wars trilogy.
Hi everybody, I'm Leanza Cornett for FXM Dailies, and I am coming to you from the ever-busy and almost always noisy Fox lot. It's the studio that's brought us so many great classic films, including one of the best films ever made. You guessed it, Star Wars. Now, you may already know that January 31st marked the re-release of this movie, along with remastered audio and never-before-seen brand new footage. On its original release date, May 25th, 1977, Star Wars took audiences by storm and literally changed the film industry. Before then, studios started launching their summer film seasons the second week of June. Now, the blockbuster summer seasons begin the Wednesday before Memorial Day, a day that is now affectionately known as George Lucas Day in the movie industry. Now, Star Wars not only had an effect on the release dates of future movies, it also rejuvenated science fiction films, a genre that Hollywood had pretty much forgotten about since the late 1960s. On this very special edition of FXM Dailies, we are going to celebrate the re-release of the movie that changed our industry and take a look at what's still to come.
When the film came out, everybody said, oh, it's so wonderful, it's a great film, and everything. I said, well, it's about 60% of what I wanted it to be. I'm not real happy with it. And a lot of the interviews then, say, what's this guy, what's wrong with this guy? It's beautiful. Why isn't he happy with it? And now you can see the film and see why I wasn't happy.
This will be a day long remembered.
Sharp new prints and plenty of surprises await fans with the new edition of the Star Wars trilogy. The computer technology used in Jurassic Park has helped change some 350 shots in the films.
It's much clearer, much more beautiful than it's ever been, ever, even when it was first released. And then going back and taking scenes like Han Solo and Jabba the Hutt, which was a scene I had to cut because we just didn't have time to do the stop-motion animation for Jabba.
Look, Jabba, next time you want to talk to me, come see me yourself. Don't send one of these twerps.
The cut scene was filmed in 1976 with an actor standing in for Jabba. Over 20 years later, the creature could finally be added as a computer-generated image.
We gave it to the CG artist, and they are artists because they actually really create this character. And they worked on it for about 4 months. And it's very difficult to get a wireframe model to interact with a real actor. And it was a very complicated process, but I think they pulled it off fantastically.
Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed.
George Lucas knows some critics are concerned about the power of computers to rewrite classic films.
That's a big issue, and I'm a founding member of the Artists' Rights Foundation, which is trying to get legislation passed that says you cannot do that except or unless you're the filmmaker yourself.
Somebody has to save us kids.
This February and March, The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi light up screens with new effects and new creatures. And in 1999, Lucas will release the first of 3 new Star Wars films. They tell the story of Luke Skywalker's father.
You'll see in the trilogy, the new special edition, we've used a lot more digital sets, we've used a lot more digital characters, which is a kind of a prototype of what I'm going to be doing in the new movies.
No one to stop us this time.
But first, a new generation can see what started it all as Star Wars blasts back to where it's always belonged, on movie screens.
The Force will be with you, always.
It was here in a screening room at Fox where people were shown the first preview screening of Star Wars. It wasn't until people started jumping out of their seats and cheering that Mr. Lucas decided maybe he shouldn't change anything about this movie. Even though it was the top-grossing film of its time, studios weren't exactly knocking down George Lucas's door to get it made. Universal had an option on Lucas's next film after American Graffiti, but they didn't want it to be Star Wars. United Artists turned it down as well. Thank goodness that Alan Ladd Jr. here at Fox had the good sense to get it made. Even casting on this movie wasn't easy. They saw hundreds of actors for the roles of Luke, Leia, and Han. The casting director wanted Amy Irving to play Princess Leia and John Travolta to play Han Solo, but they were both cast in other movies at the time. Other people who were strongly considered were Christopher Walken and Nick Nolte as Han Solo, Jodie Foster as Princess Leia, and Will Seltzer, who was in more American Graffiti for the role of Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill ended up winning the role of Luke Skywalker based on his all-American boyish appearance. It It wasn't so easy for Harrison Ford, though, to get Han Solo. He was working in carpentry in the production offices at the time of casting, and the casting director thought he would be perfect for the role. But he was in American Graffiti, and George Lucas had made it known that he wanted someone new for the role of Han Solo. But Harrison Ford luckily got the role anyway, and the rest, of course, is history. The film proved that a movie, even without big stars, could be a hugely profitable success. We caught up with some of the people who became stars because of this movie at the re-release premiere.
Fairy tales are timeless, and we had everything that a good fairy tale has.
20 years after Star Wars made movie history, its makers reunited in Westwood, California, along with some celebrity friends for the premiere of the special edition.
We didn't have a premiere 20 years ago because the film wasn't that big, so 20 years ago today, I was sitting in a mixing room wondering if this film was ever going to make its money back.
Most fans and a few cast members were eager to see the digital changes Lucas made in his classic creation.
I haven't seen them yet, so hopefully they'll do something about my hairstyle.
He's got a great gift to be able to go back and say, well, you know, I wanted the Wookiee to say, you know, and he can do it now.
Carrie Fisher was also wishing for a computer makeover. She thought her looks would get her fired 20 years ago.
Because I was too fat. And I still think that's going to happen. But don't tell George.
Even without a premiere 20 years ago, Star Wars created its own excitement on its opening weekend. George Lucas recalls being across the street from Mann's Chinese Theater, taking a break from working on foreign prints of the film.
I looked out the window and there was a huge crowd across the street. I couldn't figure out what it was, so after I finished eating, I went and I realized it was the Chinese Theater was right across the street, and actually Star Wars was playing, and I'd forgotten it was even going to open that day.
And we were astonished. There were lines around the block. And I think people forget that the public discovered this movie. They've kept it alive in their hearts and minds all these years, and it's all of these people that made it what it is.
We are back atop the executive building here on the Fox lot. When Star Wars was released in the United States, it made about $400 million. Not bad for a movie that only cost about $12 million. Of course, that number doesn't include the licensing and marketing agreements that have reportedly brought in billions. Star Wars also had a great impact on the world of special effects. It not only proved that special effects would bring in massive audiences, it also set the standard for the use of miniatures and optical printing, paving the way for the special effects we see today. Now, one of the special effects didn't exactly work as planned. R2-D2 was supposed to be a remote-controlled, fully operating robot. Unfortunately, it never worked, so they just made a fiberglass mold and pulled it around the set with a piece of wire. R2 also happened to be the most difficult voice to create. We talked to Ben Burtt, the sound designer, about changing sound history.
It's not just the visual effects that got a spruce up in the new special edition of the Star Wars trilogy. The original soundtrack has gotten a forceful digital remix. Academy Award-winning sound designer Ben Burtt supervised the audio for the original film. Recently, he took on the same duties for the special edition.
We didn't want to throw out the sound in the film and do it over. There were so many classic things in it. So many things that we could do better. And they also represent what the film is and how it's known to people. I worked for Lucasfilm for 15 years as the sound designer, and that meant that I was responsible for creating what you hear. The voices, the laser guns, the spaceships, the alien creatures, the Darth Vader breathing. We redesigned the sound field in the film to bring more of the sound off to go around the audience, so a spaceship can fly from behind you and move all the way to another corner, this sort of thing.
Burtt had the chance to finally use suggestions George Lucas had made 20 years earlier.
I think it's an artificial world, but it's one which we gladly enter into if the ground rules that the filmmakers and creators have looked at perception and how the eye and brain see things, and they pay attention to what we've learned about perception, they're able to create illusions which we think are real.
Well, that wraps up this week's show. Thank you for celebrating the re-release of the Star Wars trilogy with us. And as always, thank you for watching Hollywood's first movie network, FXM Movies from Fox. For FXM Dailies, I'm Leanza Cornett.
This week on FXM Dailies, we'll see the effect the trilogy is having on the box office and get some behind-the-scenes trivia.
Hi, I'm Leanza Cornett for FXM Dailies, and I am coming to you from atop the executive building here on the very busy Fox lot. You can hear the construction all around as the lot continues to grow. Well, now that the Star Wars trilogy has all been re-released, we wanted to take another behind-the-scenes look at the movies which have had such a tremendous effect on the box office. So today we have a very special guest, Laurent Bouzereau, whose book Star Wars: The Annotated Scripts will be coming out this summer. Now, Laurent, I understand that you were actually the first person who was granted access to all of the original screenplays.
Exactly, and I got to not only read the different screenplays, but I got to read the story conferences, even George Lucas's little handwritten notes, you know, that he did before he even wrote the screenplays. So you discover all kinds of secrets, all kinds of interesting information, like, you know, Han Solo in the very first Star Wars screenplay was a green monster. In the first treatment, the robots were actually humans. And the names even changed. You know, Yoda was known as Minch, and then Minch Yoda, and then Yoda. So it's fascinating to see, you know, the evolution, basically.
Wow, and you're so fortunate to have actually had a kind of first look at that. Now, I know that George Lucas probably had no idea what the re-release of these films would do for the industry, but in fact, it's had quite an effect all over town.
I'm not afraid. You will be.
The power of the Force hasn't just grabbed moviegoers.
You must go after the Force, Luke.
The current reissue of Star Wars also has other studios scrambling, as the George Lucas epic still dominates the box office.
It is useless to resist.
Chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the hit space saga are now in theaters. It only took the re-release of the first Star Wars 1 month to earn $100 million, and that's just in the United States alone. It even passed E.T. to become the most successful film of all time.
The other Hollywood studios are responding by getting everything else out of the water.
David Hochman is a senior writer for Entertainment Weekly.
Paramount had The Saint coming out, and they just decided to bump it a couple weeks to make room for this monster that nobody really knew was going to be there.
You've got to get away from me.
Star Wars also stole some heat from the opening of Dante's Peak, but as a recent movie weekend showed, it can also help new films.
Star Wars really brought people into the movies. I mean, there were 3 movies that did over $10 million worth of business. Even a movie like Vegas Vacation did $13 million worth of business, which is unusual.
And thanks to Star Wars, more classic films may return to theaters. Among those getting big screen sightings soon, Close Encounters of the Third Kind and The Godfather.
This just cleared the way for old movies to be brought out and shown again with a new light.
I like the sound of that.
The Empire Strikes Back will also be seen in a new light, thanks to the kind of high-tech surprises viewers got in the special edition of Star Wars.
But even George Lucas admits computers can't replace the human touch.
Frank Oz doing a Yoda, that's about as brilliant a piece of puppetry as you're ever going to see in your life. And I can't repeat that in digital.
So certain are you?
So what is new in Empire? Well, about 100 special effects shots were digitally improved in this ice battle sequence. And you'll see more of Lando Calrissian's City in the Clouds, according to Irvin Kershner, who directed Empire.
We had so much stuff jammed into these studios, into the studio space, that we couldn't really put anything outside any windows if we had them. Well, here's what George did. Now, when you're inside the city and the group is walking down the corridor, I was shocked. Here are windows, giant windows cut into the corridor walls, and you can see the city. What we really had intended was now on the screen.
Join me. It is your destiny.
All right, we are back with author Laurent Bouzereau. Now, please give us some more of the trilogy trivia, if you will.
Yeah, on The Empire Strikes Back, for instance, you know, the big secret was that Darth Vader was Luke's father, and that was a very well-kept secret, even when the scripts were being written. So, what was very interesting that Irvin Kershner, the director, didn't tell anybody that Darth Vader was Luke's father except to Mark Hamill. So when you see the actor playing Darth Vader going, "I am your father," he was saying something completely different. And that was later on dubbed by James Earl Jones, playing the voice of Darth Vader. So it's fascinating.
It is truly fascinating, amazing. Now, as you probably know, all three of the Star Wars stars have gone on to very many things. Carrie Fisher, for instance, is a busy actress as well as a scriptwriter and also an author. Mark Hamill wrote a novel which he's hoping to make into a movie, and I think we're all pretty much aware of what's happened in Harrison Ford's career. But all three of these big stars remember just how they reacted when Star Wars entered their lives.
When R2 has been safely delivered to my forces, you get your award.
When I first read the script, I read it, I think, out loud. It was unbelievable. I mean, it read almost as good as the movie was, and we all wanted to play Han Solo. And I think that was a big part of it.
You got yourself a ship. But where do we go from here?
They've taken her to find the hidden bases. How are we going to get to the rebels before she breaks? The Empire already beat us here.
She's part of the royal family. They won't get any information from her. She knows the art of mind control.
I read with Mark and Carrie and hundreds of other candidates.
Harrison was playing Han Solo, and I knew him from American Graffiti and from The Conversation and some other movies, and immediately I was awestruck.
Now, wait a minute. She's on Alderaan. No, that's impossible. Nobody dares venture near the system of Alderaan. I'm freebooter, boy. Not a revolutionary. You're on the wrong ship.
I know he tested other actors for the Han Solo part, but he just got used to me.
Well, how many more systems have to get blown away before you have no place to hide or forced to fight? Don't you realize what's going on?
I heard I got the part, and they said they're going to send the script over. And I'll never forget to this day, I sat down and started reading this thing, and I went, wait a minute, I think, was Harrison the Luke guy, or was I the Luke guy? And I think I was the Luke guy. I was the Luke guy. This is about me.
All right, we're back. Now, you told us about Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. What can you tell us about Return of the Jedi?
Well, in reading the different screenplays, especially for the climax of Jedi, it was very interesting to realize that originally the climax of the movie took place on the home planet of the Empire, where Luke and the Emperor and Vader were actually confronting each other in the core of the planet amongst lava pits and some kind of a volcano. Well, of course, that was changed, and in the movie, their confrontation is on the Death Star. Another interesting bit was the scene of Luke burning his father's body at the end of the movie was done in the screenplays. That was kind of an afterthought, and that was actually shot at Lucasfilm at George Lucas's ranch.
Wow, it is all so fascinating. And George Lucas just keeps on changing all the scenes. Even though he didn't have quite the budget restrictions on Empire and Jedi as he did on Star Wars, he still didn't get to do all of the things he wanted to do, which is one reason he was so excited about making all these special editions.
Look, Jabba, next time you want to talk to me, come see me yourself. Don't send one of these twerps.
One highlight of the Star Wars Special Edition was a new scene with a series favorite, interstellar loan shark Jabba the Hutt.
We just didn't have time to do the stop-motion animation for Jabba. And now being able to finish it and put it in the film is very gratifying.
Now Jabba's team of out-of-this-world entertainers get a new digital look in the special edition of The Return of the Jedi.
In Jedi, in the Jabba the Hutt scene, there was a little musical number, which we never really had the time to shoot. But it was meant originally to be a big musical number, which I thought would be funny in the middle of a Star Wars film. Cy Snoodles, who was the main singer, couldn't move around. She had to stay in one place. Her lips just barely moved. Her eyes didn't move at all. This gave me the opportunity to go back, turn that into the musical number that I'd hoped it would be originally, make a Cy Snoodles that actually can sing and move around on the stage. We've got another couple of characters and some backup singers and some drummers, and it's a much more elaborate sequence than it was before. A lot of it is technical. A lot of it is things that only a filmmaker would really notice, but some of the things I think, make the whole film much more complete and much more enjoyable.
Well, that wraps up this week's show. A very big thank you to Laurent Bouzereau for sharing some secrets from Star Wars with us. We'll be looking for your book, Star Wars: The Annotated Scripts, this summer.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching Hollywood's first movie network, FXM Movies from Fox. For FXM Dailies, I'm Leanza Cornett.